This is a beautiful format because if you look over here, look at all these different takes. I can just keep on doing them until I get the one I like. Minimal editing means that I can keep trying. Welcome to INTP to INTP, and I am in the process of experimenting with doing NESI over TE, and it's going well. I have a facial care routine going. I am losing weight. Just see how those go. But today I'd like to share a realization I just made that I've been exploring, a certain idea I've been exploring. So me and my INTJ friend are starting a podcast. We found this studio nearby in Korea that provides video recording for 10,000 won an hour, which is about $8. So it's been really cool. We've just been going as many times as we can to just really get the reps in. And there's an inner conflict that I realized I had today that I was working through, and I'll just talk through it with you to really establish what it is and how I resolved it. So the big idea is this. There are certain ways that I wanted the podcast to go. I was sharing my ideas, and I won't put words in the INTJ friend's mouth, but he went along with them. And so the next podcast we had, he simply followed exactly what I suggested. And the feeling was very strange because to me it was just an idea, a suggestion, something to try, but to him it was an order. And I immediately felt uneasy because when it was an idea, it was just something that we can try, but when he was following it, it was now something that we were doing together. I felt maybe a little bit of responsibility for what I was telling him. And I feel like in my life there was a progression of this happening all throughout, where I had ideas that I really liked, but as soon as I told it to someone else, I immediately didn't want I felt scared that it was out there in the world. To be more concrete, I remember having brainstorms in my job as a software engineer, and I would share an idea, and someone else would say, "Oh, that's interesting. Tell me more." And I would be so afraid of the idea being out there that I would say, "Oh, never mind. Like I thought about it. Maybe it won't work." That would be my reaction as soon as the idea started becoming something out there. And just in general, that exposure feeling was something that I avoided for a lot of my life. I would say, first 25 years of my life, I would get out there with an idea that I thought was interesting. Maybe I would come and talk to someone like, "Oh, hey, I want to talk with you," and then, because it's now out there, I think INTPs, you would relate. It's now out there, and I can no longer keep it as my own idea. I immediately want to run away. I'm talking to, so I introduce myself to someone new, and they say, "Oh, well, it was nice meeting you. Bye." I would want to go away as fast as possible. This same idea is what was happening with the podcast. I had an idea. To be specific, I was telling my friend, "Oh, I would love for your feedback when we're talking about the message, but I'd like the message to be central to the podcast, and I'd like you to share feedback specific to the message." Because what he was doing was talking about all kinds of things that were tangentially related, and it felt like it was muddying the message, in my opinion. Well, he listened exactly, and he did exactly what I said. And I felt like, oh, you're following me. And I felt a little afraid that he was just doing what I was saying. So I wanted to reflect on that and work through it. So this general idea of my ideas, getting out there and becoming more than just my ideas. I did some reflection on the way home. I was having a chat with ChatGPT, and what I came to realize is this: that there really is no such thing. When I'm by myself, I like experimenting to figure stuff out, right? I like just trying it and not really having much outcome tied to it. I'm not TEing it. I'm not maximizing outcomes, right? And I think the fear is that when people begin to implement my ideas, it means that I'm sure about it and we're sure we're going to get an outcome. But then I realized that even plans are actually just experiments. Even entire companies, like that's what a startup is. A startup is actually an experiment. So what I realized is, yes, startups, being a CEO, executing on plans, we're even working with a team, it is just larger and larger, more interesting experiments to try out. And so even when that is happening, I can still treat it as an experiment. It just involves other people. And let me see if I can find a relevant quote. There's a Jeff Bezos quote. If you know it will work, it is not an experiment. To invent, you have to experiment. And if you know in advance it is going to work, it is not an experiment. And that's coming from the CEO of a company that's doing well. So I realize, actually, a lot of times when a company fails, it's because they fail to experiment. They require the outcomes to be certain for them to act on something. And my exploratory nature is actually better when running business. I just need to get over the idea that I need to be certain for them to execute on my experiment. And so I was talking here about don't TE, NESI. Even when we're going out into execution of companies, when we're going out to dedicating money towards things, I can still understand that is also an experiment, and I don't know how it's going to turn out. And I can approach it with an NE mindset, which is, here it goes. That is my idea. That's what's interesting. We're going to go in that direction to find out what happens. Even when other people are involved, even when it's a big company, even when I'm working at Google and they're going to dedicate $1 billion to it, it is still an experiment. There's still an option for it to fail. That's really interesting. Because that allows me to do way more things than I thought was possible. Once I understand that it's not about responsibility, it's not about finding outcomes, it's about learning and finding out what happens. OpenAI, another example. They didn't really know if ChatGPT was going to be so high performing. But they had an idea, and they wanted to find out. And so they took the money, they ran the experiment, and the result was good. It could have turned out bad, but just the willingness to run the experiment is something I think us INTPs are capable of doing, as long as you're able to frame these things as experiments and remain open-minded when you're doing them, even when you're dedicating money, even when you're involving entire teams and plans. It's still an experiment. That's what I want to share. That's what I want to think about. I'll reflect on that. That is today's idea that I'm exploring. I think that's a very freeing thing. It allows me even to be like, CEO, or just like in charge of things, to have the courage to face the unknown and have an idea and stand with the idea as interesting, even though, and openly saying, I don't know how it's going to turn out, but it is very interesting, and I think we should try it. To be able to do that is not really something a TE person can do, and I can understand now that if I have the courage to experiment even in the most open of situations, which I can if I just simply understand that I don't know. If I have the courage to do that, then I think I can bring a lot of interesting value to the world. And I think you can too, INTPs. So that's my message today. Even when involving many people, even when involving deadlines, even when involving money, you can still treat it as any SI. You don't know if the outcome is going to work out, but it is exciting. So let's try it. That's today's vlog. See you.